Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Paul Downs, Jay Goltz, and Sarah Segal talk about where the dust has settled after years of turmoil in the labor market. As you know all too well, we've been through COVID, supply chain issues, inflation, labor shortages, the Great Resignation, minimum wage hikes, new pay transparency regulations, and countless rumors of recessions that have yet to come, all of which has had an impact on wages. And that's why I decided to ask Paul, Jay, and Sarah where their thinking has landed. The consensus here is that leverage is shifting back to employers, but Paul, for one, remains committed to paying his people more than they can find elsewhere. It's worth it to me to have the team I want, he says, and sure, it affects profitability, but turnover affects profitability too, and I'd rather not have that. Plus, we also talk about whether Lululemon was right to fire 2 retail employees who tried to stop a robbery, and we answer the following listener question. If something's not working, how do you know when it's time to walk away? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. Magazine named the best newsletter for business owners and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Paul Downs, who is CEO of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, which makes custom conference tables outside of Philadelphia. Jay Goltz, who's CEO of the Goltz Group, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Sarah Segal, who's CEO of Segal Communications, a public relations firm based in San Francisco. The episode is titled, Why Do You Pay What You Pay? Welcome, Paul, Jay, and Sarah. It's great to have you here. I want to start today by talking about employee compensation. As we all know, we've been through a lot of turmoil the last few years. You know, COVID, inflation, the labor shortage, the Great Resignation, all things that have had an impact on hiring and wages. I'm sure I left something out.
Yeah, there's 5 things that have changed. COVID, inflation, labor shortage, minimum wage changes, and the fact that people are now posting how much money you make in ads that we didn't used to do.
Pay transparency.
Yeah.
All right, that's a lot.
Whether it was forced or not, it's become clear that it does help your response rate. So yes, that's a lot is right.
So I guess my question is, why are you paying what you're paying, and are you happy with where you landed? Maybe Paul, start with you.
Why am I paying what I pay? I tend to pay high because it takes such a long time to train my staff that I don't want them going anywhere.
So that's been true for a while, I assume?
Yeah.
Well before COVID?
Yes, that's always been my strategy, which is I don't want people to have a better situation that they can easily waltz into, and including pay. When you say higher, do you have a set percentage in mind over what you think is the market rate? Not really. It's mostly, are they making $25 an hour plus in total compensation, which I think of as kind of a baseline for being able to survive in this, in my area. And then some employees make considerably more than that. And those are the ones who are professional degrees or whatever, and they have options. They could go get another job anytime. So I focus on staff retention, and part of that is pay, and part of that is just providing a good working environment. That said, yeah, I had to give a bunch of people raises the last few years. People just come into my office and say, I want a raise. Up.
I think part of the key in your case is part of your business model is you're selling a premium product, which is why you can afford to pay more because you're giving a premium product. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
You're not selling a commodity.
Exactly. It's worth it to me to have the team I want. And it affects profitability, but turnover affects profitability too. And I'd rather not have that.
Paul, when somebody comes into your office and says, I want a raise, do you give them the raise, or do you make them go get an offer?
No. I don't want anybody looking around. Usually I give them a raise, because generally there's a reasonable case to be made for it. Often I hire people, and a year later, the ones who are really good, they're like, hey, I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Here's some money. So there's no huge calculation on my part as to exactly what it'll be. But one thing I do keep careful track of is what their total compensation works out to in pay per hour. Like if you roll in all the costs of the health insurance and everything that we do, I've got a spreadsheet that divides all those numbers into the number of hours they work. And I can say to them, okay, you're only getting paid what you think is $20 an hour, but I'm covering health insurance for your wife and 3 kids, and that's another $11 an hour. So surprise, you're actually making 31. It's just that some of it is in a form that you hate.
Wait, the question, Paul, is so how often I assume from knowing you, I think you try to stay ahead of this and you're trying to pay appropriately. So I'm sure this happens, but it doesn't happen that often, does it? Because you already are staying up with it. I mean, this isn't a monthly event.
Yeah, I would say actually that the proportion of times I have simply given people money as opposed to them asking for it is maybe 3 to 1. Like, for instance, you hire someone and you have to think about, okay, well, I hired this guy, I needed to pay him X to get him in the door. Do I need to recalculate some of the other people in that case just to be fair? I mean, that's a pretty common scenario. And then other times there might be someone who's shy and just is afraid to ask me and they're doing well. And I'll be like, hey, it's been a year. What do you want?
Seriously? What do you want?
Yeah. Okay. Let me just give a warning to everybody listening to this. The things I do, you probably should not do, because I really am biasing the whole thing towards staff retention and investing in people over a series of years, because that's how long it takes to train people up. And so, no, I'm not doing a lot of things. I mean, I'm sure Jay has a completely different playbook.
I wouldn't say completely different, but you'd be correct. Different in that you are truly dealing with skilled labor, and I'm dealing with semi-skilled in some cases and unskilled in other cases. So I fully understand what you're saying, that in your case, you've got skilled labor that takes you years. You really can't afford turnover. In my case, I can afford a little turnover. And so it's not, but it's also not 180 degrees from what you're doing. I also have very low turnover. My turnover is probably 10%. So
yeah, mine's less than that.
Right.
I only had one employee leave after COVID voluntarily, and that was because he just got tired of the commute. And so he found a job that was closer to home. And it's too bad because he was a fantastic engineer and we miss him. We were able to replace him, but money wasn't really the issue at that point. I would have given him more money, but I couldn't find a way to not have him spend 45 minutes in a car each way.
Traffic is I got to tell you, traffic has become a major factor in employment these days.
Absolutely.
Jay, don't you have somebody who has a commute of like an hour and a half each way?
Yeah. And he's been with me for 25 years and he's a critical person. And I'm tight with him and he's totally with me on the whole mission. But yeah, he drives a long time.
That's crazy.
But makes a 6-figure, he's a 6-figure guy. This isn't a $40,000 job.
Because that's still an incredible, that's 1,500 hours a year.
Yeah. Let me add a piece to this that I don't think either of you have to deal with, which is minimum wage. In 2014, the minimum wage in the city of Chicago, because there was no special minimum wage for Chicago versus Illinois, was $8.25. And as of next week, the minimum wage in Chicago is now $15.80, which means it's gone up 91% in 9 years, which is about 10% a year. That does have an effect on things, and it's what's caused what I call labor compression, which means the spread between the top person and the bottom is not as much as it used to be. And part of it is simply because when you think about it, if one person can frame 10 pictures a day, and the other person can do 5, one could say, oh, well, they should make twice as much. That doesn't really work because at the end of the day, everybody has rent to pay and has food to buy, which is why I fully support minimum wage. And it's compressed, though, meaning maybe at the bottom they're making $3 an hour more, but that doesn't mean it went all the way to the top. And that has to be factored in.
Tell us about the impact that increase had on you specifically. Were you paying many workers the minimum at that point?
I've been over the years close, and I've definitely had to build that into my cost of doing business. I would say this, I just lately had a case of every one of those 5 things I mentioned have had a profound impact. You put them all together, that's a lot of moving things. And I have had to sit down and think, all right, what is our starting wage going to be? What is the marketplace? We put ads out there. We're not getting a lot of response. There's less employees. So we just had a situation that somebody came to us and complained that we've been trying to find someone for a particular position, and now we're putting it in the ad. We raised how much money we were offering, and she goes, that's almost what I'm making, and I've been here for 2 years. And you know what? She had every right to be upset, and we talked about it, and the fact is, we gave her a raise, and we're going to give other people in that department raises. So part of my feelings on this is I feel good that she felt comfortable coming to say something and that she didn't just quit. And we apologized. And we said, you know what? We didn't react quick enough to the changing dynamics of the marketplace. We fixed it. She's happy. We're happy. But we did get caught a little bit, on our heels with that because we didn't change it quick enough because it's definitely affected the marketplace, especially the fact we're putting it in the ad now, how much we're paying, which we never used to do.
Are you required to do that, Jay?
I don't believe it's become a law in Illinois yet, but here's the big but. But I keep reading that they keep doing studies. You do get more respondents when you put it in the ad. So we're going with the flow and we put it in there. And I think it's true. You also get less tire kickers because they can see what you're paying and they're not going to bother if it's not what they're looking for.
Where are you in terms of your salary ranges for your positions? Did you increase them over the last year?
No, absolutely. Because of inflation, we probably did 5-6%, which we haven't done in many. I don't know that we ever done that. Inflation's been next to nothing for years. We were good with 2 or 3%. So we definitely gave a bigger raise. I don't think it's going to continue to this year, but time will tell.
When you're asking about the range, sorry, you mean like I pay from $40,000 a year to $110,000 a year or something like that?
Per position. So like if you have somebody who's like a sander, I don't know what you have, but like last year, your starting salary for that position was $35,000.
No, most of those people, they're making in the mid to upper 20s per hour with some variation on what their benefit package is because we offer to cover employees, whatever dependents they want to bring, we pay for part of that.
Do you think that we're in an employer's market or an employee's market right now?
I think it's evened out.
I think it's not quite as employee as it was, but it's not 2009, that's for sure.
Right. I think it's in between.
Well, here in California, I definitely think it's migrating entirely to an employer market because, I look at my LinkedIn feed and open to opportunities and looking for jobs is like every other post at this point, just because we've seen so much of the tech stuff implode here on the West Coast. I increased my salary ranges last year, and it wasn't for inflation, but it was for getting people to apply.
I will tell you that this quote unquote problem is an opportunity because some of my competitors are knee jerking and not giving any raises, and it's pissing people off. It's an opportunity to get some good employees who their bosses have gotten short-sighted and forgot the quote unquote greatest asset is their people. And I do think it's freeing up some good employees that might not have been looking before, which is what I think you're seeing.
Agency side's a little weird though when you're a boutique agency like me, is that I can't compete with the big guys, like in terms of their salaries. I just can't.
Right.
And I'm surrounded by tech companies that are hiring people straight out of college at 6 figures. I cannot compete with that. So really what I have to offer is the full package, we will really have a respect for people's work-life balance. We really have a great PTO plan.
I think you're right. But the fact is that is competing. But the fact is you might not financially be able to compete, but you are competing. And I'm in the same situation. You were here a couple of weeks ago. I had 2 different employees tell me they had job offers from major retailers in the United States that came to work here because they want to work in what I call a collaborative environment. They want to matter and they don't want to deal with the corporate politics and stuff. We can compete out there. There are people out there now that will give up money for working in a nice place. And to your point, the hours thing, some of these people, I brought back somebody who was making 30% more at one of the big companies. They were just killing them 60, 70 hour weeks every week.
Yeah. I'm small enough where we have summer Fridays And nobody puts out of offices on summer Fridays. If there's something urgent, we respond to it. But like if a team member is going to be out and they don't have anybody to cover because their partner in crime is at a conference or something like that, I'm like, I'm here. Like I'm always a person that people can call because I never put out of office. But like, because I want people to be able to disconnect and people to go off the grid and really kind of have that opportunity to get refreshed and motivated and inspired by life. But corporate, you don't really do that as much.
No, and there are plenty of people out there that value that more than money.
So, Sarah, when you raised your wages last year, how did you figure out the number where you settled?
Well, we're lucky in that we are part of a number of different professional PR organizations, one of which is really great about doing surveys where people provide, transparency in what they're offering people. And we also look at what other people are offering. There's more and more companies are posting the range at least. And so we bumped it up by, a small percentage, but it just makes it a little more competitive. But, part of me is like, inflation is going down. The job market's becoming more tough. I'm thinking maybe later this year, like I can reconsider those increases, depending on what things look like. Because honestly, like I think I'm paying somebody out of college way too much. I mean, I made peanuts when I went out of college, but it was a great job and it was a cool opportunity and I loved it. It wasn't about the money.
Paul, I want to go back to that conversation you have where you turn to your employees and say, how much of a raise would you like? I'm curious, do you get realistic responses? Are you often able to meet their request? How does that go?
You know what? You do that with people who are afraid to ask for raises. So they're generally delighted that I've recognized them and I rarely get an answer back. And so I'll say, how about X? And they're pleased as can be.
I don't think people are greedy. I think when you ask a question like that, someone's not going to look at you and be like, I want $10 million a year. They're going to look at what they do and give an appropriate answer. I just think human nature, most people won't do that.
Well, the other thing is, it just as a basic negotiating tactic, it's better to get the other person to name the first number.
Well, I was going to say, what if they ask for less than you were prepared to pay? What do you do?
Depends on what they ask for, but sometimes I give them more. That particular conversation often happens at the point where I'm deciding to hire somebody. And I'm interviewing them and I say, what do you want? What are you looking for? And if I want to hire them, they tell me X and such dollars an hour. I'll say, listen, I'll do X plus 1. I want you to accept this job right now, though. I'm going to take you off the market because I want you to work for me.
He's watching too much Shark Tank. That's the problem.
Paul, you told us that a while ago when the labor shortage was acute. You're still doing it?
Well, yeah. It is a tactic that's predicated on the employees in charge labor market. And when the time comes that we flip back the other way, I may rethink it or I may not, because I think that it's a statement of faith and a statement of the kind of relationship I want to have with my employees at a moment when, for the person who's thinking of joining us, it's a big risk. They don't know what they're walking into. So if the boss is right there saying, I think you're going to be great and I want to give you more and I have faith in you, and what the next thing I say to them is, okay, I'm going to pay you this, and if you turn out, if I'm mistaken, I'll get rid of you. And so it's on you now.
There goes that goodwill.
Well, no, it's just being honest. It's just like, I'm not going to let someone take advantage of me, but I will if I...
But do you need to say that to them? Do they need to be told?
Do you actually use that language, or do you say, listen, if it turns out you're not worth it, it's not going to be working for either of us and you're probably going to leave?
No, I say, we're going to give you all the support. We have written down new employee guidelines that tell them exactly what they need to do. And I say, we're making an investment in you, but if it doesn't work out, I will fire you. It won't last long. So first thing, show up, act interested. And I just give them what's going to happen. I don't like to sugarcoat stuff. or be vague about something which I have in my mind as a possible course of action. And I've had, as far as I know, very little negative reaction to that. Because again, it's establishing a relationship, an honest relationship, right from the get-go.
There's also a benefit to that if they end up coming in late, you can go, you know what, Bob? I made it perfectly clear when I interviewed you that wasn't going to be an acceptable thing. Like, I do think it's fair to tell them the way the deal is so they know what they're getting into. Like, if you have a hard time getting up in the morning, this isn't the right place to work.
Yeah.
That is playing fair.
Well, we have a policy of flex time just to handle that. That's part of what we tell them is like, okay, whatever you got to do in the morning to get your kids to school, whatever, figure it out. We just want you to figure out when you can be here and then to be here consistently. That's the policy.
I think that your policy, it works well for certain industries, but like, I don't think I would ever implement that in a professional services industry because I don't want someone coming to work for me just for the paycheck.
Well, you're not hiring blue collar then, because that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I'm not. It's not about the hourly rate. It's about the opportunity, what I can teach them, what they'll do, like all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, the pay should be fair, but the opportunity should be awesome.
And in your business, there's a huge difference. They could come to work for you and really learn the industry and the business and get involved with different aspects, or they could go to some bigger place and have just one job all day long. So I think that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. Like, I talk to people that have worked for like the huge conglomerates, and like their entry level people are like building media lists and taking, inventory of coverage for clients
and getting coffee.
But they're not even on client calls. They're not,
right.
They're not doing anything. Like, I don't care what your title is. If you want to try something, like, for sure. Generally, in most PR businesses, to do new business and start with like putting together proposals, you need to be a director level, if not vice president level. I brought a junior level person on a call with me with a restaurant group this week. And just, so she could take notes and listen in. She's really good at a certain aspect of grand openings and restaurant PR. And so I thought it'd be good for her to kind of listen to the conversation, and got off the call. And I was like, do you want to take first crack at putting the proposal together? And she looks at me, she goes like, that was going to be my Q3 goals. Like, I would love to do that. I'm like, go for it.
That's a huge advantage for them to take a job with you. In my business, just not cutting their hours is a huge advantage. There are places like mine that if business gets slow, they think nothing of saying, oh, you'll have to take off Thursday and Friday. And if their hours cut, I just had someone leave who was complaining about how much money she made. And the fact is, we just looked at her LinkedIn connections. She went to work for a company. When you Google it, they only hire freelancers. Well, I can assure you that her hours are going to be, these people need to pay their rent. And like when we get slow, even if we don't have a backlog, we find stuff for them to do because we know they got to pay their rent. And that's a huge advantage to someone who works in a factory. So it depends on what business you're in, but those extras are not in the ad necessarily, or not, but to be able to make a proposal with you, that's worth $1 zillion. To not be laid off on Thursday and Friday is worth this. So it depends what business you're in, but we can all, as small business owners, offer them some real advantages that are valuable to them.
We're seeing a large trend of people that have been freelance starting to go back for full-time jobs because of that inconsistency, where they want to be able to have the reliability of a paycheck.
I want to hit a couple more topics before we go. Paul, we've been tracking the time and money you've been investing in a marketing campaign. You recently introduced a new website that you'd been telling us about. Are you happy with it?
Yeah, so far. I mean, nobody's seen it yet, but
I saw it.
Well, okay. We have not made the connection to our target market yet, but everybody who's seen it says it looks nice. I realize it's missing some information, so I'm going to be building it out over the summer. Our first real event where we're going to be trying to meet people and get them to use the site is in the fall. So
wow.
There's still content to be put in, but I'm pretty happy with it, happy with the process.
I looked at it. I think it looks great. If I was looking for a custom-made conference table, I don't know why anybody would go anywhere else. I think you hit all the points.
Paul, how much did you spend on your new website?
Oh, I think that the money I paid to the web guys was something on the order of $22,000, and the amount of time I put in, priceless, right? So,
what about the photography?
The photography, some of it came from the Bowstring, a different media company that we engaged, and I think that cost me maybe $35,000 for the entire package, which included some photography, but had a lot of other stuff as well.
It's a good investment.
I hope so. It's actually cheaper than hauling conference tables around to furniture shows, which would be the other way to meet people.
I didn't ask that question by accident. I know that photography is a critical piece, and this isn't obvious to most people. I had to learn it. Photography is a critical piece to having a great looking website, and I knew that wasn't going to be cheap.
The photography was part of a package of services that included sort of strategic thinking, the market research, including interviewing the target market, and developing various campaign strategies. And photography was maybe half the cost of that. But what these people could do that we can't do is come in and take really nice video. And so they spent a day shooting in the shop, and I used a fair amount of that content in the site. I also shot a lot of video myself, and it's surprising how much you can get done with an iPhone these days, but it's not nearly as beautiful as the video they shot. So I featured that on the homepage and a couple of other places.
Did you learn anything? Anything surprise you in the process?
I guess the most surprising thing was something that happened when they showed up to film, which is in the world of video production, there's a fairly large number of people involved who seem to do nothing all day. And they're just standing around, like getting a cup of coffee or whatever. And to my workers, it was like, what are those people doing? Are we paying for that? And I'm like, yeah, we are. But that's...
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's kind of how it goes.
No, I also look at this and I'm thinking, really, what are all those? But I'm sure they're doing something.
I'm not so sure they're doing something because they sure didn't look like they were doing anything. But it wasn't my thing to just try to reinvent the way video is produced. So I just said, okay, shrug.
Paul, yeah, I think you said that there's an event in the fall that you're tying this to. What's the event?
Yes. It's sort of like a show, except it's not quite a show. What it is we're trying to target a very discrete group of clients with this new site, which is high-end corporate architects and interior designers. And this event is actually a kind of a get to meet these people where a company identifies the top people from the client side, the architects and interior designers, and I presume either pays them or offers them some goodies to show up at a resort in San Antonio for a weekend. And then me and other people like me pay some pretty big money to sit down and have half-hour conversations with, I think we're booked for 20 different people.
Wow, like speed dating.
It's sort of like speed dating, slow speed dating, but it's getting around all the defenses and all the bullshit and just getting right to the people we want to talk to. And I've been talking to this company who runs the event for 4 years now, and we were just about ready to do it in 2020, believe it or not. And then that went down the tubes for a while. But I have limited number of places that I can consider to meet my target audience. There just aren't that many shows, and the big furniture industry show, Jay was just in Chicago last week. I mean, it's an enormous production, and it would cost me $100,000 to do it. So I'm willing to spend, I think I'm in for $21,000 for this weekend. And then we're going to devote a lot of resources to the follow-up and making sure that we are putting physical objects in these people's hands every few months from there on out, because I think that's the only way to actually make an impression these days. Now, my marketing firm had thrown out a digital strategy where you start with just ad buys and try to zero in and get the target audience to call us. And I'm going to try that, but I don't have much faith in it because I think you're starting with too broad a funnel. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
All right. I want to talk about something that's been in the news recently, which is that 2 employees of the Lululemon retail chain recently tried to stop a robbery. And in return for doing that, the store immediately afterward fired both of those employees, which produced a big public backlash. It kind of became a bit of a PR nightmare. People were outraged that this store would fire people who tried to save it money. The company doubled down afterwards and said, they didn't do what they were trained to do, so we fired them. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts about that.
Oh, I'm not surprised. I mean, most companies, retail companies, have it in their policies that you are not allowed to run after anybody walking out the doors. Apple is very well known for that. And there's a huge epidemic of smash and grab here in California, at least. And it's a bigger liability for an employee to be trying to police that kind of thing than it is to just let the people take the items out. So, I mean, they violated probably company policy and they lost their jobs because of it. And honestly, they have to protect themselves because of that. Like, yeah, it's a PR nightmare because people are like, oh, they lost their jobs because they were trying to do the right thing, this and that.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It wasn't the right thing. The problem is they're trying to save people from getting killed in their stores. And this policy wasn't just made up for nothing. They have the responsibility of protecting the lives of all of their employees. They made a policy with that in mind. And these people decided they knew better. And, it's a problem. Now, the question is, was it crystal clear to these employees? Did they absolutely know? Should they have suspended them perhaps instead of fired them for the PR angle? But I certainly can understand where if somebody would have, God forbid, got shot and killed, then it would be all over the news what terrible management is. Look at they had they're trying to protect their employees, and I can understand why they fired them. It's unpleasant, but that's tricky.
I'm just going to throw something out there, though, which is that I don't disagree with what either of you said. And if I had to write a policy for my employees in retail, it would be the same policy. It's simply not worth anybody getting hurt over a couple of shirts or whatever it is. However, the flip side is that when it's absolutely crystal clear in policy that nothing's going to be done, you're inviting a lot more theft. And it's difficult for people to feel like they're part of an organization that's telling them, hey, people can come into your place of business where you work and do whatever they feel like, and you're not allowed to do anything about it. It's very corrosive. And I don't think there's a simple answer because really the police should be on this, but clearly that's not happening. So when you see a rising tide of just disorder and crime sweeping through the whole country, it's very distressing for people. It's distressing to hear about it. It's distressing to watch it. If someone came into my shop with and started stealing stuff, it would be a horrible thing to watch. Very difficult to feel like, oh, why would I come back the next day anyway? Like my bosses are saying it's a free-for-all here. People can do whatever they feel like.
So would it have been a smarter thing for them to send out a memo to every employee saying that this is what happened, we have a policy, this is why we have a policy, and while we appreciate the well-intentioned efforts of so-and-so, we can't emphasize enough, this can't happen again, and then not fire them? Would that have been smarter, perhaps? Probably.
Everything about that incident sends a message to the current employees, which is we care about you in a way that's only self-serving. In other words, we don't care about your state of mind. We care about the company.
Wait, it's saying we want you to stay alive.
I think that they make it pretty clear the only reason they want them to stay alive is because they don't want to pay for the consequences. Like if they were really interested, they would hire security, right?
This is probably not the first time it's happened. Other employees have probably tried to stop shoplifters, and they made an example of these two people.
Okay, I'm curious. Those two people are now in the job market. If they showed up, Jay, at your door and said, hey, I got fired because I gave a damn about, and okay, I made a mistake, would you see that as a positive or a negative?
First of all, I would ask them, did you know what the policy was? What were you thinking? I would certainly have a conversation about it.
The statement from the company was that they knowingly broke the rule. I think
of course the company is going to say that.
To Sarah's point, to be clear, it's not that it just happened. When you think about it, this literally has to be happening every week, if not every day. They have enough stores. This isn't a year. It must be happening every single day. What we don't know is how clear did they make the policy, how reinforced it is. That we don't know. And that's why I'm not playing judge and jury. I'd want to hear more details on, did you know the policy? What were you thinking when you did that? blah, 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 blah. Was it a kid that you could clearly see didn't have a weapon? I mean,
So you might hire the employees that
maybe.
People are allowed to make mistakes and make judgment calls. Like the person, this is not going to live with them forever in terms of their career opportunities. At least it shouldn't. But, the company had absolute right to enforce its policy, even if there was an option of just giving them a slap on the wrist. I bet you anything, they've given 100, if not thousands of slaps on the wrist for similar things. And they finally were just like, listen, if we don't do what we say we'll do when people do this, it's going to keep happening. And it's a huge liability that's going to cost them so much money if anything were ever to go wrong.
That's all true, but the only problem with it is they were trying to do something for the benefit of the company, and that's what really just, ouch. And now I will tell you, you know what? I have an example of what's happened to me. I once had someone working for me. They would get in fights with customers because we didn't do that, and I go, don't fight with a customer over $50. Just smile and take care of it. And this individual could not stop themselves from doing it. And we had to fire the person because, at some point, even though they were well-intentioned, we know what a liability that is. So that's why I say I'd like to hear the entire story, a little more detailed. How many times were they warned? Now, would it maybe been smarter to suspend them for a week and say, why don't you take a week off and decide whether you can work in an environment where you can be able to control yourself if this happens again? Would that have been smarter? I would think probably. But then to your point, Sarah, maybe they already tried that. I don't know.
If you have rules in place and you don't enforce them, then people are going to consistently go around them or break them. And it weakens the credibility of your business. For example, like we have policies where we don't work with jerks. Recently, I had to have a offline conversation with the client and basically say, we're going to drop you if things don't change, because you can't be sending those kind of emails to my employees. If you have issues with anything we're delivering, you can call me up. Here's my phone number. And they stopped. If we had left them, they would have been in trouble because they had a big thing coming up that we were supporting them on, and they didn't have time to switch horses. So I had the, leverage there, but you have to enforce the rules.
The problem with being in business is what defines a jerk to you is not necessarily what defines a jerk to me. Like there's some black and white. They grab someone's arm. Okay, done. They say, what kind of bullshit is this with, okay, I don't call that abusive. They call them you way worse. Okay, there's a line there. So it's not always black and white.
We have just a minute or two left. I want to get to one more question, which is a reader question. I thought was a good question. The question is, how do you know when it's time to give up on something? A project, an expansion, a business, whatever it might be. Anybody got some advice?
I've held on too long for sure. And I think you have to say to yourself, if I knew what I know today, would I have done this? And if you say probably not, it's probably time to pull the plug on it. You're talking to someone who's spent 6 figures that I shouldn't have, that I should have realized this wasn't going anywhere. And I just kept into I'm going to fix this thing. And it was delusional. And I think I've gotten better since then.
I would say that there's 2 scenarios that I experienced. One is just a project I'm trying, like this whole marketing thing. I'm throwing a ton of money at it. I don't know whether it's going to work. And if it doesn't, I'll stop throwing money at it. The other one that comes up all the time, though, is whether you should get rid of an employee who's trouble. And almost always I've found that in the first decades of being a boss, I was too slow to do it. And now I know what to watch for, and I'm quick to do it.
I've learned that when you start questioning it, it's time. Because I played the game literally 50 times. Oh, I give it 50-50. I have never won that bet. Never. Not one time did this person all of a sudden, oh my God, look, that was a good gamble. They ended up saving them. Never's happened. So
I believe in 2 things. One, follow your gut. If your gut says no, then drop it. Like your gut is your intuition, your gut is like the most powerful thing. And the second one is if you're starting to feel physical stress because of a situation where your neck is tight, you're anxious, you're like it causing you a physical impact, it's probably whatever you're doing, it's not worth it.
And I want to publicly say that my gut has been wrong many, many, many times. So it takes a long time to get a sophisticated gut, but every good thing I've ever done and everything bad thing I've ever done has come from my gut. So it did take me a long time to develop the skill set. With the employees, this is easy. Here's my best one. If the person came in tomorrow and quit, would you be relieved?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it works. And I've used it myself. Even I'd ask my manager, listen, if she quit tomorrow, how would you feel? And then that's really the greatest gut check, because your emotions know that it's time for it to happen.
That can be like projects. Like if the project all of a sudden was taken off your plate, would you be bummed out or would you be relieved? And if you're relieved, then maybe it's time to wrap that up.
The worst misquoted quote ever is Winston Churchill, never, 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 never give in. They left off the other half, which, unless in good judgment, that's a bad thing to live by. Sometimes it's time to move on. There's no question. Sometimes it's time to move on.
It's time to move on right now.
Nicely played, Lauren. Nicely played.
My thanks to Paul Downs, Sarah Segal, and Jay Goltz, and to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, everyone. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.